There is nothing so wonderful in the world as telling stories.
Tous les matins, on essaye de traverser le miroir et de regarder le monde différemment.
It is true, I am a woman.
Une fois que ce saut est fait, tout devient possible.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Casiraghi. Welcome to the podcast of Les Rendezvous littéraires Rue Cambon, a place where we meet to talk about writing, to talk about books. Let's meet women writers who have just taken their first step, the most decisive, the most difficult in the world of literature. How did their vocation call to them? What are their writing rituals? Who reads them and what do they read?
I'm Erica Wagner, and it's my pleasure to introduce Harriet Constable and welcome her to Chanel's podcast, Les Rencontres. Harriet Constable grew up with music. Her mother is a classically trained pianist, and she herself played the flute as a girl. Yet even so, the intensity which drives her debut novel, The Instrumentalist, is stunning. The book, set in 18th century Venice, tells the story of a foundling, Anna Maria della Pietà, who is raised in a convent and music school that trained its young female inhabitants to be remarkable musicians despite the presumed disadvantages of their birth. Le Figlie di Coro, the daughters of the choir, as they were called, made up an orchestra, one of the most renowned orchestras of the Venetian Republic. Their director was a composer called Antonio Vivaldi, and his work with these young women inspired and guided him, yet their names are forgotten, while his is not. Anna Maria is a real historical figure. Harriet Constable tells her story in a sweeping, immersive fiction. Chosen as one of the Observer's 10 Best New Novelists for 2024, the paper described The Instrumentalist as an impassioned tale full of colour and sound that depicts Anna Maria as a driven prodigy whose talent will empower and imperil her. It was also chosen by the BBC, The New Statesman and Harper's Bazaar as one of the books to look out for this year. Harriet, however, has, you'll forgive the cliché in this context, many strings to her bow. Before turning to fiction, she made her life as a multimedia journalist and director-producer, working in both print and in film. She has written for the New York Times, The Economist, the Financial Times, and the BBC, and her work has taken her all over the world. On the African continent, she followed the 2017 Kenyan election through the eyes of a rollerblading subculture in Nairobi. She's covered conservation by tracking rhinos on foot. She's a co-author of The Rough Guide to Kenya. In Britain, her work has been shortlisted for AITO Young Travel Writer of the Year and the Travel Media Award for Broadcast Programme of the Year. But despite her experience of work around the world, when she arrived in Venice to research The Instrumentalist, she was swept away. Arriving was like stepping onto a set, she has said. I can't wait to discover how she peopled that set with her vivid characters and created this extraordinary tale. Anna Maria is a heroine with rare determination, an acknowledgement of her own talent and skill, someone who must push forward no matter what. In the early pages of the novel, the reader finds Anna Maria standing on a podium, about to be made a maestro, a master of music. As Harriet Constable writes, it feels like every second Anna Maria has breathed has led to this, like every choice, every beat is connected. This wonderful author goes on to show those connections, those challenges, with irrepressible flair. I'm delighted to be speaking to her today for Les Rencontres. Welcome, Harriet.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
So in the first part of this conversation, we're going to talk about your vocation as a writer. I talked about your musical background, particularly relevant to this book. Maybe tell us a little bit more about that and what led you back to music after years in journalism.
Well, yeah, I come from a musical family. My mum is a classically trained musician, as you've talked about, but we all played instruments. My dad plays the piano and my brother plays the saxophone, and I play the flute and the piano, and I sing. My mum and I sing together. So music was very much a part of my upbringing, and the kind of music of the greats, Bach and Mozart and Vivaldi and the like, was there in the background. It wasn't until 2019, however, that I discovered the story of the Pietà and the women and girls who lived and worked there. I just happened upon it. It was a line in a nonfiction book. It happened to mention that Antonio Vivaldi taught in an orphanage in Venice, and that there was this all-female orchestra that he taught. And with the background that I have and my background as a journalist, I'm always looking for these stories of remarkable people, particularly women, who have been missed or forgotten. So I was sort of surprised and a bit annoyed that I hadn't heard about these women and girls, because I thought I probably would have with my background. And I knew there was a story, and I knew I would do this story in one way or another. As I started to research it, it was Anna Maria's name that kept rising to the surface. She was obviously very special to Vivaldi, and I could see that I would be able to sort of tag the story around her. I hadn't expected to go back and write about music, but actually it was a great joy to do so. And it was a real pleasure to combine truth and imagination in this way, to be able to be so creative with the musical element of the book as well.
Tell us a little more about Anna Maria, because we are talking about vocation. And of course, she is a character with a powerful vocation against all odds, it would seem.
Anna Maria della Pietà was a real woman. She was a remarkable musician, one of the greatest musicians of the 18th century. She was an orphan. As a baby, she was posted through the wall to the Ospedale della Pietà, the orphanage. And while that's a real tragedy in her life, it's also a huge opportunity for her, because there in the Republic of Music, they were advanced enough to decide to give girls a musical education. She went on to become star violinist, one of the most famous violinists of the time. She was said to eclipse even the great Giuseppe Tartini. And her relationship to Vivaldi was that she was his favorite student. He composed music specifically for her. He bought her a violin. She was obviously a huge influence on him. But exactly how she felt about it is the space. That's what's missing. And that's where it seemed to me that it was going to be necessary to inject some imagination. I thought, if I can tag the book to the facts as much as possible, but then just breathe imagination into how she feels about it and why she's going after it and what it might be like to grow up being her in this time, I might be able to get at just how special and exciting these women were.
That's the perfect space for a novel, isn't it? Because we can have records of facts, but feeling is where fiction enters. One of the ways that you express Anna Maria's feeling is through synesthesia. She experiences music as colors and textures. What led you to this, and how do you feel about it within your own writing?
I knew that I was going to need to find a way to express the music. There was a bit of a risk with a book about classical music that it might feel too exclusive, potentially that it might feel a bit dusty. I wanted to express the music in a way that anyone could enjoy and anyone could, revel in, regardless of whether they really have a musical background or much of an experience with classical music. I feel that Anna Maria was incredibly determined and also had this spectacularly creative mind. And as I started interviewing musicians and composers, I found that they often used words of colour to express music, even if they didn't have synesthesia. And I'm a very colourful sort of person. I love color. I'm very moved by color. So, and I think with my filmmaking background as well, the idea of visualizing it and allowing Anna Maria to kind of see physically the music through color and to tug it physically to the page would be fun to write and fun to read, hopefully. And it was a real explosion of creativity writing it in that way.
It works wonderfully, and it's interesting to hear you refer to classical music, which is what we call it now. What you sense in the novel is that it's just music. There wasn't this sense of one kind of music being inaccessible or music being inaccessible to a certain group of people.
And not only is it music, but it's the most exciting, most interesting, most innovative thing anyone's ever heard. Music is exploding in this period in a way that is frightening and exhilarating, and it couldn't have happened like that without the women and girls of the Pietà and Vivaldi himself. So that feeling that this was a time of such extraordinary innovation and opportunity is something I really wanted to express in the book.
As I said in my introduction, you've had a very busy, fascinating life professionally, but what did it mean to set that aside to work on a book like this?
Once I had decided to do this book, I shifted everything to prioritize it. I moved my week around. I mean, I've been freelance my whole career, so I've had good amount of power over how I work and what stories I want to work on, and I've really enjoyed that. So I was able to kind of shift my freelance work toward the end of the week, and that meant that I gave all my best energy and all my creative energy to the book. So I started with researching a few days a week in the British Library, and then I would do my journalistic pieces at the end of the week, and then kind of just realized I knew, knowing myself, that I would need to completely immerse myself in the world, and I would need to give myself the space to obsess. And if I could do that, then I might get something down. And if I could get a first draft down, then I could start the work of fixing it, improving it. And so I cancelled all my work in the new year, and I gave myself 3 months off to get the first draft down. From that moment on, I was able to then balance the editing of the book with my ongoing freelance work until I took it out to agents.
And my next question, tell us a bit about the process of finding an agent, finding a publisher, finding the people who were aligned with your vision of the book and would support it.
Once I had the first draft, I started sort of sending out for a bit of feedback. That was sort of finished the first draft around April. And by October, I felt that I had incorporated and developed it as much as I could. I knew I still had tons of energy to work on it, tons of passion for this story, but I just wasn't quite sure where to push next. And so I thought this is probably the moment to start taking it out. But I certainly didn't think it was going to be ready to really take to agents. So I sent it out to a friend who's an author and said, if you had any time to read a couple of chapters, let me know what you think. Expecting, sometimes people don't have time. Sometimes that takes months. She got back to me within 15 minutes and said, I love it. I'd like to share it with my agent. I had made a list of agents I was planning to approach over the next several months. She was one of the top 5. This author put me in touch with her agent. That kicked off everything, really, because once her agent was interested, I was also able to speak to some of the other top agents, and through that signed with Madeleine Milburn, who is a remarkable woman. She had such ambition for the book and such vision for my career, far beyond really what I had dreamed was even possible. So she just had such passion for it. And Maddie suggested a few edits and tweaks that we could make over a couple of weeks over Christmas. And then we took it out to publishers in the January of 2023, last year.
Fantastic. And now I'd love to invite you to read the first page of it for us.
So I'm going to read the very beginning of chapter 2, because in chapter 1, we're with Anna Maria's mother, and it's the moments in which she is being left at the Pietà. Chapter 2 is when we first meet Anna Maria. She is standing on a podium, poised for the moment of her lifetime. Soon she will accept the certificate of maestro. She will be, officially, a master of music. It feels like every second Anna Maria has breathed has led to this, like every choice, every beat is connected. The lights blind her, heat radiates from the audience. She feels thousands of adoring eyes, all of them fixed on her, and the respect. It has a weight to it. It moves through the air, thick and alive and glorious. She sucks it into her lungs. Then, a giggle. She frowns, snaps from her imagination and into her dormitory, where her podium is a single wooden bed, her certificate a handkerchief. "It is my duty and my honour," Paulina, a thin girl with a pointed chin, bellows in a mock low voice. Two, her focus shifts, the moment almost gone. "Bestow," Anna Maria whispers out of the corner of her mouth. Paulina swallows the laugh bubbling up inside. This may seem like child's play to some, but not to Anna Maria, because there are some things that girls just know. Some know their spirit can rage like a fire. Some know that power is up for the taking. Some know that death comes early and cruel. And some know that they are destined for greatness. Anna Maria della Pietà is destined for greatness.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. In the next part of our conversation, I want to ask you about your process. So I'll start by inquiring about your day at your desk. What do you like to have when you set out to write?
When I start to write, I don't start at the desk, actually. I start probably in my living room, blasting music out. With the Instrumentalist, I would play the Four Seasons every morning, and I would play that very loudly. I would pretend I was Anna Maria, kind of pulling the energy into the room. My Anna Maria is a very intense person, and she has this great determination, and she's kind of always storming about places. I wanted to bring that energy to the page when I started writing, so I would kind of cajole the energy and then storm up to the laptop and begin. So I would start with music. I usually write for a couple of hours. I always have a plan. I'm working to a plot that I have, I know what's coming next usually, but of course you get stuck, you get lost, and so when that happens, usually after a couple of hours, I would take the problem out with me for a walk, listen to different music, muse on it until I had my solution, come back and work for another couple of hours. I try to write 2,000 words a day when I'm drafting. I once read that Stephen King writes 2,000 words a day when he's drafting, and I thought, great, I'll do that then.
A good model to follow. What books influenced you writing The Instrumentalist, and are there particular historical novelists that you admire?
So many books and poetry and so much influenced me in the construction of this. A great reference was The Queen's Gambit by Walter Tevis. Of course, it was transformed into a wonderful Netflix series, but prior to that, it was a book, and it's about another prodigy who will go on to do remarkable things with her career, but also who will struggle in life. So she was a great reference for Anna Maria. I love books like Perfume by Patrick Suskind, with all of its opulence and its senses, the rich senses of that book. Maggie O'Farrell, her imagining of Hamlet blew me away. This idea of another untold true story, but she applied so much emotional intelligence and so much empathy to those characters so that we don't just think, Hamlet, famous play, cool. We really understand that there were real people who influenced the creation of that. And, I call Margaret Atwood the Queen. I think everything she does is spectacular. I adore her writing, and, so many more like them. Kieran Millward Hargrave, Lauren Groff, Tracy Chevalier.
It's interesting to think about the books. I'm fascinated you mentioned The Queen's Gambit, because to me also that connects to a woman making her way in what we think of as a masculine world. So yes, Beth Harmon wins all those chess games, but she still has plenty to contend with. Anna Maria is a prodigy, but she still has plenty to contend with.
Yes, one of the core themes at the heart of The Instrumentalist is power. Who has it? Anna Maria, in many ways, has so much power because she's been given this education that other women don't have, because she has raw talent, and because she has huge drive and determination. Yet, on the other hand, she's an orphan. She doesn't have a healthy adult figure in her life. She doesn't have love, and she's a girl, and it's the 18th century. And she is yet to understand just how limited her world might become. There's the constant threat of being married off or put to work if you can't survive, if you can't make it as a musician. In that context, Vivaldi is a sort of savior figure, potentially. He's not only just remarkably exciting as a talented musician, but he's someone who might be your ticket to freedom. So there's that power imbalance already by him being a man in a male-dominated society, but also there's the additional complexity of all that she misses and does not have, and him potentially being able to create that for her. But as much as it feels like Vivaldi has the power, Anna Maria, with her talent, threatens to eclipse him. And that male-female kind of dichotomy gets it gets challenged when music enters the scene. Music can save Anna Maria, and it can also threaten Vivaldi.
One of the things she does have, though, is wonderful relationships, not always easy, with her fellow musicians, the other girls in the convent. And you feel that she's in, again, not a simple, but a supportive atmosphere. Are there artistic relationships that are particularly supportive for you as a writer?
So many. And that's something I feel so lucky for and grateful for. So Crystal Sutherland is one of my dear friends. She's an amazing author. She was someone who was kind enough to kind of welcome me into this world and guide me through it and introduce me to people. Anna Russell is one of my other dear friends, who is a writer for The New Yorker. And those two have particularly supported this journey from journalism into fiction in a really remarkable way. My partner, Owen, is a big part of the creative process. I actually really like to talk about my books out loud, and I find sometimes just verbalizing the point at which I'm stuck really helps me to get to the next point. And he's great for kind of logic and strategy.
So writing not always as solitary as it's thought
Exactly.
to be. You took a trip to Venice to research and write this novel. How important was that to the process? How much had you done by the time you got there?
Going to Venice was completely vital, I think, to immerse myself in the world, to really feel that I had gone to 18th century Venice, that I'd sort of stepped into Anna Maria's world, is what brought the book to life for me. I had done a lot of research before that. I'd spent, as I mentioned, several days in the British Library of every week. I couldn't actually physically go to Venice because it was the pandemic, so I went at the first possible opportunity. I knew an awful lot about the kind of political background. I knew a lot about Venice itself. I had constructed a huge horizontal timeline to try and figure out Anna Maria's mindset by plotting the entire history of Venice next to the Pietà, next to Vivaldi and Anna Maria and other contemporary musicians. And through that, I realized that she must have been very confident. She lived in this incredibly wealthy, incredibly advanced place, and she was being given a lot of opportunities. So there would have been a level of confidence and determination. It was only once I arrived that I was completely blown away. That was what surprised me. I hadn't even really thought about the setting. I had thought about many other things, but not so much that this was in Venice. And it's this land of contrasts. The setting seemed to so perfectly echo the themes of the book. There's this constant knife edge for Anna Maria between glory or the abyss. And Venice is, on the one hand, this kind of glittering, rich, golden place full of wealthy people and masked balls. And on the other hand, there's the dank, festering canals and there's the buildings crumbling into the water. And I wanted the reader to come there with me, and I wanted them to touch and smell and feel Venice. And it was only by going there myself and doing that and really pretending to be Anna Maria. I would run around listening to the Four Seasons, imagining I was seeing the colours. I went to concerts at the Fenice. I interviewed musicians at the Conservatoire of Music. I think I actually freaked a few people out there because I would stand outside the conservatoire imagining I was seeing the colours pouring out of the windows, and they were like, that woman's back again, standing there. I went back so many times. I did go and do some interviews, so I introduced myself eventually.
And what was the most unexpected aspect of that trip? Was there something that really surprised you?
Oh, the thing that really blew my mind. And I had booked this Airbnb nearby. Well, I just booked, and then I looked as soon as I arrived to see, right, where's the Pietà? I'll go there tomorrow. And I realized I was right around the corner from it. It still exists. It's been turned into a 5-star hotel. So I thought, well, it's right there. I'm going to go around right now. And it was a beautiful evening. The sun was setting. The lagoon was purple and lilac. And I was expecting this orphanage to be in some murky backwater, kind of hidden away from the rest of the world. The Pietà building is right on the waterfront. It's 500 meters from the Doge's Palace. It's occupying some of the most, wealthy, powerful footprint on Venice. And I couldn't believe that. It was another thing that made me think, you'd be so proud. I mean, it was a real tragedy to be an orphan, and it would have obviously been really disturbing for these girls not to have their parents and this love in their life, but equally to be given these opportunities to be growing up in this location, Venice, but also this particular building in this location. I just thought they would have had such a kind of pride in that. That
right,
blew my
at the
mind.
heart of things.
Yes.
In the last part of our conversation, I want to ask you a little bit about the reception of this book just out in the world. The early reaction was really powerful. What's that been like for you? Did you have a sense that it might be like that, or did it take you completely by surprise?
I was completely flabbergasted by the reaction. It's a huge honor and privilege to have your work received in this way. Of course, it's what every writer dreams of. Occasionally, it's a bit overwhelming. When it is, I just remind myself that this isn't really about me. It's about these women and girls. It's because they were so special and because their story is so remarkable that there is this level of excitement, I think, and it's really about them and expressing their magnificence. And that's something I take great pleasure in.
After you finish the book, is there a particular reaction that meant something special to you?
One reaction that, really touched me was a professor from the New School in New York read it, and she contacted me with a very lovely, thoughtful response, but she also asked if she could start teaching it to her students, and she teaches them about female history and is now using it to get them thinking and talking about how to express the history of women, how to bring them back to life when we don't have much to go on, or where we breathe imagination into the gaps. How do we do that? What's a reasonable or exciting way of doing that? And that is just exactly what I could have hoped for, that there would be the chance to inspire or ignite further exploration of women's history is, more than what I would have dreamed of.
That answer leads me nicely to my next question, which is why it's important to you to uncover the stories of women, who knows what you'll go on to do, women whose stories have been hidden, that we haven't known. Why do you think this is significant for you and significant for your readers?
sort of two parts to that answer. The first is that Anna Maria della Pietà was a remarkable musician. She was one of the greatest of the 18th century. People said that there was, in all the world, could not be found her equal man or woman. We should know about someone like that if she was that special. Someone like Anna Maria overcame so much and must have demonstrated such resilience to achieve all that she did. That's a story that is inspiring, it's worth knowing. It influences how we think about ourselves now. The second part to the answer is that history has broadly been written by men and about men. That's not to say it is all bad. I'm just saying we've had some brilliant work. We've revealed all sorts of interesting things. There's so much more to reveal. History is not complete. It's not done. And the problem with looking at things through generally the same perspective is that you tend to get the same sort of story and you often get an incomplete picture. There's a reason Vivaldi's name is not in the book. We need to look at history from a female lens as well as a male lens, and we need lots of different voices to start asking questions of history, not just mine, but hopefully many more will start to question, where do these great pieces of art come from? Who was involved in creating them? The more variety that we have in exploring where we've come from, the more we start to piece together that our history is so much more colourful and nuanced and interesting than we've imagined it to be. That affects not just how we understand where we've come from, but what we think of ourselves now and what we can even imagine for our futures.
How do you feel about Vivaldi now? I don't want to give too much away, no spoilers, but he is a complex figure in the novel. Did it change your relationship to him and his music, writing this?
I think that Vivaldi was a remarkable musician. I think that he was a vital creative force in this explosion of music into the concerto form. I have enormous respect for his skill, and I love the music because when we're listening to Vivaldi's music, we're not just listening to Vivaldi, we're hearing the stories of these women and girls. When you listen to the Four Seasons next, and it's on all the time because it's the most famous piece of classical music in the world, don't just hear the seasons. And that was a special and remarkable thing that they were able to sort of put voice to the seasons through music. But now also by knowing the stories of these women and girls, we can hear their hope and their desire and their desperation and their determination. When you think that this music was first being played by these disabled, disfigured orphan girls who were playing for their lives, playing to save themselves, you hear more in the music. And I think of them as well as Vivaldi when I'm listening to that music now, and that's why I adore it so much.
Anna Maria's life was changed by music. Your life has been changed by writing this book. You're now writing full-time. You're not balancing journalism and writing. What's that transformation been like for you?
In many ways, things haven't changed all that much. I was already freelance. I was already working from home. I was already managing my own projects. What has changed is sort of the extremes with which the projects happen. So you work on one project for so much longer that I've just read about classical music and thought about classical music and immersed myself in this world for several years now. There's long periods of research, which is actually very similar to my journalistic work where I'm going out and researching, but also interviewing people and gathering information. Then there's long periods of writing, which are much more introverted and quiet than I'm used to, but actually I love it. I love to just shut the world away and go and talk to my characters and live in my imagination like that. I find that great fun. And then there's these long periods as well of promotion and being on stage and podcasts like this and talking to people about it. So it's much more separate and they're much longer periods. And then you kind of jump back into the next period of intense writing and quietening down.
Finally, we have a series of questions that we ask all of our guests. So I'll come to those now. And the first one is, what is the most surprising thing that you've learned from being a writer?
What has amazed me is how, when you're really in the creative process, sometimes the book sort of takes over from you and all of a sudden a door emerges and, you'll reach forward to open it, but actually someone just storms out and they've got a whole plan and agenda and you're following them and they have all these things to say, and that magic of the book kind of taking over from you and leading the way is so special. It's not something I'd experienced in journalism. So I've been amazed by that. Very surprising and very special.
Sticking to the theme of surprise, what would people be surprised to learn about you?
When I was a little girl, when I was about 5, my parents, they dropped me off for ballet lessons. And I went in and the teacher said, "What's your name?" And I said, "What is my name?" And I told her, "Rachel Nightingale." And then I went by the pseudonym of Rachel Nightingale for an entire term before my parents came to parents' evening and discovered that I had been living under this false identity. So, yeah, I think they'd be surprised to discover that I had chosen a new name for myself at 5 years old.
What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Okay, we're in a Venetian square. There's music floating through the air. There's probably a kitten, curled up on my lap. There's pasta and crisp glass of wine, a notepad and a pen. And I just know in the back of my mind that everyone I love is safe and happy.
What advice would you give to anyone who wants to express their creativity?
Do not wait for permission. You're allowed to let yourself try. You're allowed to let yourself learn and get good. And it is work, so you must do the work. But just let yourself make mistakes, let yourself be embarrassed, and then let yourself get good. Because you will get good if you do the work. And yeah, when that voice inside is telling you, this is embarrassing, why are you doing this? Just tell yourself you're allowed to try and you're allowed to keep trying because you love it and because you want to create something. And that's what I did with The Instrumentalist. I said, it will always be enough for me just to create the book, regardless of whether anyone buys it, regardless if anyone thinks it's any good. I will keep working at it because I believe in it. And I think with that mindset, when you do get where you want to go, because eventually it might take a while, but you will get there, you can tell yourself, you're just getting started.
In one word, how would you like to be remembered as a writer?
I would like to be remembered as bold. I would like to look back and think I really went for it. I wasn't too held back. I didn't keep things inside that wanted to be freed. I just really was passionate and I really tried to express these remarkable people and that I really went for it. So I think bold. And
our final question, what would you like your second novel to look like? What can you tell us? Yes, I've already begun. I'm working on the first draft at the moment, so I've got something down, but it's right at that beginning stage. We are in the glittering splendor of the 1680s Paris opera. We're right at the beginning of the days of opera. It's Louis XIV's reign, and it's really an adventure story. So I would like it to feel pacey and exciting and delicious and high quality. And I would like it to do, hopefully, what people will feel The Instrumentalist does, which plunges you in from the start and doesn't let you take a breath until the last moment. And with the last moment in this book, I want it to be a gasp. Well, I, for one, can't wait. That does sound exciting and delicious. I love that word. Thank you so much, Harriet Constable, for joining us on our podcast, Les Rencontres. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I hope we have a chance to talk again soon. I can't wait for your next book. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a real joy.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Rendezvous littéraires Rue Cambon podcast. To discover more about it, you will find images, links, and references on the Chanel website. À bientôt!